I'm Robert Guloba. I work with an NGO here in Uganda called Participatory Ecological Land Use Management. And this one is also a part of a bigger association on the African continent that is in 12 countries. So you would hear PELUM Uganda, PELUM Kenya, PELUM Tanzania, PELUM Lesotho, 12 countries. I'm also a farmer, because if you're talking about agroecology, you need to practice what you talk about. So today I'll be talking about basically agroecological practices that we employ here in East Africa, especially in Uganda, on plant nutrition and management of healthy soils. And I'll be also expecting us to share experiences. I might not be knowing everything, but from the different countries, it would be good that we share some of these experiences to enrich our knowledge and skills. Okay, I'll go straight to the presentation. Today we are going to talk about the presentation layout. We shall look at importance of soil health and plant nutrition in agriculture. Then we shall also look at the challenges agriculture is facing, especially in Africa. Then, since we are talking about agroecological practices, I will talk briefly about agroecology. Then I share experiences of agroecological practices that we are using to manage soil fertility and to keep healthy soils in Uganda, East Africa, and Africa. And the objective, I hope that we shall discuss and share experiences on agroecological practices that can improve soil health and plant nutrition. And to begin with, we are going to talk about the importance of soil health and plant nutrition in agriculture. And to start with soil health, we see that soil health enhances crop productivity. If you have nutrients in the soil, this enhances nutrient uptake, since there will be availability of both macro and micronutrients. Then we also see that it promotes biodiversity. Like you see the image I'm having here, that is a soil food web, and you can see diversity of macro and microorganisms. And we all know that for soils to be healthy and living, they must have life. And this life comes from the many microbiology and macroorganisms. Then also we see that the importance of healthy soils, we have environmental benefits. For example, carbon sequestration. Then we also see control of soil erosion, but as well water quality. Because once the soils are healthy, there is a lot of organic matter, there is a lot of microbiology, and with this, when water infiltrates into the soil, this water is being purified, toxins are being absorbed, and thus improves the quality of water to most of the water sources where we pick our water. Then when you look at plant nutrition, we see that it is essential for the growth and development of the plants, and also it enhances the crop quality. Remember, for example, if a cow feeds on grass, the cow may not necessarily make proteins. But if the grass is lacking most of the nutrients from the soil, and that cow takes the grass with less nutrients, it will also have less nutrients. Therefore, we say that plant nutrition is enhancing the nutritional value and taste and also appearance. If you have been really observant, if you feed your soils very well, most of the products from those soils have a good taste. The appearance is also good, and also the nutritional value is also going to be very good. Then for plant nutrition, it also increases resistance to stresses. And these stresses are both biotic stresses and abiotic stresses. Where we have good plant nutrition, like in humans, if you're feeding well, then you're able to withstand a lot of stresses. You're able to be tolerant and resistant to most of the diseases. So the same thing in plants, things to do with climate change stress, water stress, the heat, things to do with diseases and pests. Once they have good nutrition, plants will be able to resist or be tolerant to such stresses. But when you look at the two things, soil health and plant nutrition, they are interconnected. And they're interconnected. This comes in one, in nutrient recycling. Where you have diversity of microorganisms, there will be a lot of organic matter decomposition. And by doing this, nutrients are released in the soil for plant uptake. But also, we have symbiotic relationships. And an example I would give is the mycorrhizal fungi. Once we have a lot of biodiversity of microbiology in the soil, the symbiotic relationships increase, and also the plants will be able to uptake water and nutrients. Then we see sustainable practices. Once we see agroecological practices implemented, then we can see reduced use of chemical and depending on these synthetic chemicals that farmers buy every season. So by doing this, you find that you have an ecosystem that is sustainable and that is self-replenishing. When we look at the challenges that we are facing in agriculture, we see that we have a lot of soil erosion, and this is attributed to deforestation, especially people cut down a lot of trees for burning charcoal, which is used as a major fuel here in East Africa. Then we see overgrazing and poor land management practices. Most of the farmers are not doing the right things on their land. And you find that either they are plowing downhill, they are cutting down trees that would combat soil erosion. And by doing this, soil erosion increases, and with this climatic change, where some of the times the rains are really too much, it becomes a challenge. Then the other challenge is soil nutrient depletion, where we are using intensive farming. Somebody grows a single crop over and less replenishing the soils with either fertilizers or manure. Then poor crop residue management. We have a challenge that when we have finished harvesting most of the crops, farmers have a tendency of burning the residues. Sometimes these residues are not put back to soil. So by doing so, we are just taking away the nutrients. And also the other issue is the movement of food from the rural communities to town. We deprive the soils in the rural communities by taking the produce to town. And yet, if, for example, we are taking matoke to town, we could peel and leave the residues in the garden and just take what will be consumed. Then there is an issue of soil acidification, and this is attributed to acid rain that is coming from pollutants in the atmosphere, but also the improper use of nitrogen based fertilizers. And a case that I have is in Ethiopia. Ethiopia is now running projects on reduction of acidification. So this is also a very big challenge. Then we have soil compaction, which is attributed to overgrazing, and in some instances, overuse of machines. So when you have soil compaction, then soil loses its life. The other challenge we have is organic matter depletion. Like I have said, we normally remove crop residues, then we are conducting deforestation. Sometimes during the dry season, we burn vegetation because we don't want to waste a lot of energy, slashing and all that. Then also the poor soil management, like non-use of cover crops, green manuring, and composting. Then the other challenge, as a result of using a lot of pesticides and herbicides and chemicals, we see that we have lost biodiversity of the soil. By doing this, we halt decomposition, we halt the symbiotic relationships in the soil, but also we halt other functions that the microbes bring to our soils, especially plant protection, then also chelation, making sure that the nutrients are available for the plants. Then the other challenge we have is soil contamination. And this is especially where we have industries. Most of the industrial waste goes to water points, and also sometimes where it is deposited, once it rains, it moves and contaminates our soils. And the other issue is the improper use and disposal of pesticides. I normally give an example for farmers. Once they use a pesticide or a herbicide, they just throw containers anywhere. Once it rains, then the container is moving all over and it ends up in the water sources that causes contamination as well as our soil. So after seeing these challenges, we believe that agroecology will come hand in hand to try and alleviate most of the challenges that we are facing in agriculture. And I would define agroecology as an integrated approach to farming that emphasizes the application of ecological principles in designing and managing agricultural systems. So ecological basically means life. You work with life. So you manage the interactions between microbiology, macroorganisms. You work with the relationships to do with plants, animals, humans, and the environment. So in simple terms, I would say agroecology is farming that centers on food production that makes the best use of nature's goods and services while not damaging these resources. So when we talk about the goods and services, I would give an example of nutrient recycling. So this is a service that is normally provided by nature. The plants and animal tissue will decompose by the help of microorganisms and macroorganisms, and nutrients will be released. So instead of killing most of these resources in nature, we need to utilize them and make sure that there is a system of nutrient replenishing in the soils other than destroying nature. So when we talk about agroecology, it has 13 principles, but I have listed 7 principles that contribute to soil health. And the first principle is biodiversity. So biodiversity of plants, of animals, of insects, everything, it contributes to soil health, because within this, we see that some plants and animal tissue decompose, and microorganisms will support in the decomposition and release of nutrients. Then we see synergy. We also see recycling. Then animal health, because we believe that whatever waste comes from the animals, the urine, the dung, it also contributes to soil fertility management in agriculture. Then the soil health, which we are talking about. Then when we talk about input reduction, we are looking at the reduction of use of inorganic inputs, especially the inorganic fertilizers and also the toxic pesticides and herbicides that are going to reduce, again, on biodiversity. Then the other principle is the one that looks at land and natural resource governance. However, we also have the other principles of agroecology, but these ones not directly linked to soil health. We believe that a healthy ecosystem is complete with 3 M's. And the first M is minerals, the second M is organic matter, and the third M is microbiology. This is where agroecology comes hand in hand. When you look at the conventional way of farming, we normally put minerals into our gardens. So we put the NPK, the DAP, and all that. But in most cases, when we use pesticides and herbicides, we are killing microbiology. So the component of microbiology gets done. Then organic matter, in most cases, is not there. So we are saying, if we are going to have healthy soils, whatever practice that we are going to implement, it has to be contributing to 3 things: minerals, organic matter, and microbiology. And when we look at the principle of plant nutrition, we say that there has to be constant supply of nutrients, and these nutrients have to be diverse, and they have to be synthesized from nature. Because what normally happens, we can have our plants and we give them macronutrients and leave out the micronutrients. So in the end, when even us humans consume most of these plants that have only macronutrients, then we begin suffering from some illnesses. And this is where we normally go and say we are having food supplements. You go to the pharmacy, you buy zinc tablets. You go to the pharmacy, you buy iron. You go to the pharmacy and buy all those other supplements. This is as a result of now consuming foods that were provided with less nutrients during production. When we talk about now the practices for soil fertility, I have a list here. One, we use intercropping. Then we also talk about crop rotation. Then we talk about mulching. We talk about agroforestry. Then diversity with animal integration, because you cannot do plants alone. Then we also look at use of organic manures. And these organic manures are very many. However, I'll talk about a few, and I would also want to listen to the participants. If there are other organic manures that they are using, that I would also learn from them. So we have plant tea, we have manure tea, we have compost, we have farmyard manure, and we have biofertilizers. So when we look at intercropping with legumes, in this photo, we have a practice whereby we plant maize and beans in the same hole. So like you see the photo on the left, the beans are nitrogen fixing, but also the beans sometimes climb. So when you plant the maize and the beans in the same hole, the maize is going to benefit from the nitrogen that the beans fix, but also the maize is going to give support to the beans. So there's that association, symbiotic association. So this practice is very common here in Uganda, whereby instead of planting either maize alone or beans alone, you dig a hole, you plant maize, and also you plant beans in the same hole. Then the picture down is where we have now maize intercropped with beans. So the beans are going to serve the first purpose to fix nitrogen in the soil, but also they are going to act as a cover crop. So by doing this, you manage weeds as well as improving soil fertility. The other practice that we do is crop rotation. And with crop rotation, we alternate crops from heavy feeders to light feeders to legumes. For example, if you open up a new place, maybe it has been a forest, is too fertile, you can start with leafy crops, the vegetables and all that. Then from there, you're going to bring in fruits, the tomatoes, the eggplants, and all that. Then after that, you bring in root crops like cassava, carrots, because root crops in most cases don't need a lot of fertile soils. Then after putting the root crops, then you can introduce the legumes. So the legumes are now going to help in fixing back nitrogen and other nutrients into the soil, and the cycle continues. So crop rotation, where we have a lot of land, because nowadays we have a challenge of land decreasing every day. And sometimes it is very hard. Somebody has 1 acre of land and they cannot keep rotating on the 1 acre. So what they do, they just don't do crop rotation, but use other means of maintaining soil fertility. Then we have mulching, and this one is especially using live mulch. The most common practice is using mukuna. The mukuna beans are very aggressive. They are nitrogen fixing. They can be fed to the animals. And what happens here, once you plant maize and the maize is at the tasseling stage, we plant mukuna in the rows of the maize. So the mukuna will cover the ground, and after we harvest the maize, we shall leave the mukuna to keep the weeds down, but also the mukuna is going to keep the soils soft and moist. When the planting season comes for growing maize again, we now slash the mukuna, but we don't burn. So the mukuna, we are going to leave it on the ground, then we shall come and turn it into the ground when we are doing deep plowing. So by doing so, our soils are healthy, our soils are kept fertile. So other than mukuna, we also use many other crops like the cowpea, is also leguminous, we use beans, we use groundnuts, we use lablab, we use the lima beans. All these ones are very important in improving soil fertility as they act as live mulch. And the other one, which is common and known to everyone, is mulching. So when you mulch, one, you cover the soil, you protect it from direct sunlight, but also conserve moisture. But when you have biodiversity on your land and you put the mulch, the termites will start feeding on the mulch. Once the termites feed on the mulch, the fungi come on board and also begin breaking this mulch. Decomposition happens and nutrients are released into the soil. So mulch is really important, and it also improves the soil fertility in the long run. Then we also see agroforestry, which is basically planting trees, especially the leguminous trees, the likes of coriander, the likes of lucina, the likes of albizia. So integrate trees in your farm such that you can use them as fodder, but also they help in fixing nitrogen in the soil. So those are now the cultural practices that we do. So other than the cultural practices, then we come to the organic manures. And the first one is plant tea. So plant tea is basically made by getting hairy green leaves. We use hairy leaves because they easily decompose. Some leaves have a waxy cuticle and they are very hard to decompose. So in these photos, we are using Tithonia. And this Tithonia is known to have a lot of phosphorus, and it makes the soils fertile where it grows. So we pick the leaves, chop them into smaller pieces, then we soak them in water. We keep the soaked leaves for 14 days. After 14 days, the water is now nutritious for the plants. We mix in the ratio of 1 to 2, sometimes 1 to 3. Then we drench or apply to our crops through spraying. Then we also have the manure tea. I talked about integration and diversification of our farms by integrating animals. So the manure tea, we are now getting animal wastes. This could be poultry, it could be goats, it could be horses or cows. So these animal wastes are put in a garden bag and suspended in a container of water. This is kept again for 14 days, and after every 3 days, you keep shaking such that the nutrients will move from the garden bag to the water. After 14 days minimum, the solution will be ready. And from here, you can mix in a ratio of 1 to 2 and still drench or spray to our crops, and they will be good. Then we have the normal compost, and nowadays we no longer do compost because it is labor intensive. So compost is just to bring different materials and making a layer like you see in the photo. Previously, we used to dig holes. You dig like 3 holes, then you keep turning these materials from one hole to the other, not until it completely decomposes, and then apply to the garden. But looking at gender issues, we found that sometimes women couldn't really manage digging these holes. And then we are saying agroecology, we have to use locally available materials. But again, ladies would incur another cost of now bringing men to dig the holes. And from this, we have now innovated what we call the bio-fertilizers. Okay, the other one, if you don't want to do the plant tea, the manure tea, and the compost, we can also do farmyard manure. Like in the photo, this lady just collects the goat's pellets, places them under shade, and leaves them to decompose. Either in between a period of 1 month, 2 months, the pellets will have decomposed. And from here, she just takes them to the garden, and soil fertility will be good. Then we have vermiculture. And I normally say that the use of chemicals has led to the destruction and loss of biodiversity in the soil. So when we use a lot of chemicals, we kill the earthworms. Agroecologically, earthworms are beneficial in the soil because, one, they improve aeration in the soil. But secondly, when earthworms feed, whatever they excrete has nutrients for plants. So the gut of earthworms has good bacteria that is really, really important in nutrition for plants. So we have now decided that since we have loss of biodiversity, you can have your earthworms in a worm bin. You begin feeding the earthworms, and whatever liquid comes out, that's what we are calling the vermity. It is a fertilizer. But also, after the earthworms have fed on the decomposing material, and they have also excreted, that is vermicompost. So this one is very rich in lots of nutrients, but also the bacteria that is coming in the vermity is really important in protecting plants against pests and some diseases. Then we have what we are calling biochar. Biochar is basically carbonizing carbon materials in limited oxygen. We all understand that carbon is very important and has high affinity for water. Also, carbon has high affinity for nutrients, and carbon is home for microbiology. So once we have materials, instead of burning them in open air, we burn them in controlled environment with limited oxygen, and we make this charcoal. So the more materials you mix when making the biochar, the better it is. So we apply this biochar in the soil, but also sometimes we use the biochar as an ingredient in making other fertilizers. So for this one in Uganda, we use it when we are growing, especially matoke. When it comes to the dry season, this biochar will be having a lot of water with it, and the crops will survive during the dry season. But also, this is some form of decomposition using heat. So lots of nutrients are within the biochar that the plants can utilize.